We're here. We're here. We did
Kat,
it.
this is the moment that we've been
This is the moment.
talking about, dreaming about.
Yeah. It's been a
envisioning.
little while and it's happening
In my living room.
in your living room. I love it. Exciting.
It is exciting. And also, we were talking before about how, if you don't look back at the first thing that you've created, like the first time you've done it and you don't cringe, you weren't innovative enough, you didn't try enough, you didn't risk
push
enough.
hard. Yeah.
So this is going to be that episode. It's going to be
is.
that first episode that, 10 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, oh, that was so cute. We were so young back then.
I still plan on looking pretty young.
Young?
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, okay.
No, we are going to look back and it's going to be good.
But it's happening.
It's happening.
We're putting it out there. And so many people talk about this and dream about it and never get to do it.
Never get to do it. So this
here
is
we
great.
are.
Here we are. And what are we doing?
We are going to start our podcast.
And what is it about?
Well, we've got a little script. So I would like to ask you to get your script out.
Yes.
Because we're going to do our introduction.
Oh, yeah.
It's happening. You ready?
I am.
Welcome to Not Designed for the Grind, a period reality podcast about women's health, hormones, and the power of understanding your cycle.
I'm Dr. Katerina Bambang, consultant gynecologist and reproductive medicine subspecialist, and also founder of the Delphi Clinic.
And I'm Marlou. I'm a social entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and founder of Period Reality and Jibe. We bring together science and storytelling to change the way we understand women's health.
Every week we'll have honest conversations, we'll challenge outdated myths, and give you fresh perspectives on women's health.
And we're in our menstrual phase today. This is where we slow down, take stock, and have the conversations that require honesty. Let's begin. Okay, so not designed for the grind.
Yeah, tell me more about that. What made you think of it?
Well, I did a TEDx talk last year, and this was my working title for the talk itself, because I wanted to tell a story that appealed not just to people with a menstrual cycle, but actually to every single human being on the planet. And I think as part of that, I just realized that human beings by default are all cyclical beings, and we live in a world that is created in such a linear fashion. The whole, 9 to 5, the way that we try to move away as much as possible, really, from like natural cycles. And I thought that, by opening up the conversation beyond just menstrual cycles, it would just resonate with so many more people. So when we started talking about the podcast and how we wanted to really bring those two worlds together with like, how do we make sure that people with menstrual cycles understand and know what's happening in their own bodies, but equally open up that conversation for everyone, it just felt really fitting.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, if you think about you don't have to go as far as the menstrual cycle, but even the circadian cycle is just a daily rhythm, isn't it? And even that sort of varies. So yeah, I completely agree. And actually, everyone is affected by a menstrual cycle, whether you have one or you don't.
Yeah.
Because you'll know someone who does, who is in your life.
And we always say whether you have one or you're born from the power of one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You come from one, but you're right. And we
completely.
You'll hear this in my TEDx talk as well, but we often say like even bears hibernate on a cycle, birds migrate on a cycle. The moon obviously operates on a cycle. And I think there's this real need for human beings, I guess, to constantly optimize and, push. And I know sometimes the grind, this is some feedback I had after working on the TEDx talk, is that especially for people who are not English, bilingual. People who are bilingual, like myself, that the grind isn't always like a super obvious
that
kind
makes
of
sense. Yeah.
And I think we're referring to the hustle, right? Like the grind, the fact that everything always has to be
the same,
struggle.
And the struggle.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's sometimes remembering the ebb and flow. And actually there's an ebb and there's a flow. And it's what you said about nature. Bears hibernate in winter, but it's not just bears, it's everything. And there's a reason why, there's a really nice book called Wintering. I can't remember who's written it, but it talks about.
I've always wanted to say this. Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Go on.
We'll put the link in the show notes.
Oh, love
yes.
But she talks about the concept of we're all designed to slow down and pause in the winter. And that actually this whole New Year hustle culture, it's the 1st of January, put your, put your New Year resolution in the diary, isn't actually a thing. And it almost makes more sense that should happen in the spring equinox, because actually that is the time of renewal. The trees start getting new leaves, plants are growing. All of that is the time when we naturally renew, as opposed to winter when we're all meant to kind of become more reflective and pause and all of that. So it totally makes sense that our cycles would function in a similar way.
And I think that the difficult thing about that is different depending on where in the world you are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think, when we're in our deep winter in Australia, they might be in the peak of their summer. And I think it's our need to get everyone in that same kind of rhythm and system. And, so I'm excited to be exploring this all a little bit.
Yeah, and delve into it more. Yeah. And I suppose, do you know what? It's the intersection between the anthropological layer, like the societal layer, and the clinical sort of biological layer, and how they meet and what their interactions are and how one influences the other almost. So I love the thought of exploring that more.
Well, that was a beautiful bridge to what I was going to say next, because I've just realized that we haven't done proper introductions.
Oh, yeah.
And as I told you, I prepared a little introduction that I
know,
would like
and
to
you've made
read
me feel bad because I'm going to talk about you.
I know, but this is a little bit of cheating, because you asked me a couple of months ago, I think, if I wanted to write you a little review.
That's right.
Now, the way I'm going to read it is probably to you and not about you, but I think it was really important for me to introduce you here today, not just as a doctor, but as a human being. Obviously, that's our theme as well, but especially someone who profoundly changed my life. Yeah. And I'm so excited to say that, throughout the years, we've become really close friends.
We have.
But I thought, let's go back to that beginning and how, we got to know each other and where our journey started. So bear with me.
You're going to make me emotional.
I mean, it's not my goal, but if it happens, I'd still feel proud.
I'll keep it together.
Caring, knowledgeable, and honest. These are 3 words that perfectly describe my experience with you. When I first came to see you, I'd been through the heartbreak of 3 miscarriages. I was anxious, on edge, and honestly quite fearful of what lay ahead. From that very first appointment, you struck the perfect balance, calm and reassuring, whilst also bringing just the right amount of humour to make the heaviness easy to carry. Easier to carry. There were delays and errors with my blood tests, NHS issues, not yours. And I ended up falling pregnant before my results even came back. At my early scan, it was too soon to see a heartbeat, something I'd been through before when it ended in a miscarriage. I was terrified. You were incredible. You made me feel safe, seen, and supported. I could not have wished for a better doctor to guide me through it. And thankfully, by the next scan, we had a heartbeat, and it felt like you shared in our happiness. When the blood results eventually came in, you went above and beyond. You prioritized my case, made time to review everything, prescribed the right medication, and even moved my appointment forward to make sure I was fully supported. You truly held my hand, figuratively speaking, until it was time to pass me on to a specialist midwife for the rest of what turned out to be a healthy pregnancy. To me, you are nothing short of an angel, one with brilliant medical expertise, genuine care, and even a great sense of humor. I will be forever grateful for your guidance and support during what was such a difficult, important, and eventually beautiful chapter of my life. Thank you very much.
Can I give you a hug?
I don't know how we would do that, but yes, let's do it.
That's right. Just look
Des.
That's
it's pretty remarkable, and I don't know.
Do you know what? That means a lot to me. Thank you. And it's
And I'm just so grateful that your name is Bambang as well, because when I started
It was
building
easy to find me. Well, this is it. So I've not scripted my what I'm going to say about you, because for me, it started when you sent me that LinkedIn message, in the sense that I would never have expected to have a relationship with you outside of our clinical relationship. So when you sent me, I think I looked it up, it was the 25th of April, 2023. So yeah, and I can't even remember the details, but then you said, oh, you told me about period reality. And you said, would you like to join the advisory board? And I thought, oh, this is
I think I
interesting.
said, do you just want to have a chat with me? And then
No,
we met up for
yeah,
coffee,
that's
and
true.
it lasted
You want
like
to have a
6
chat?
hours.
And then, yeah, we were there. And even then, we were talking over each other. That was the first time we ever met for
Yeah.
coffee. And we were still just talking over each other and getting really excited. And it was such a nice conversation. And you know what? The things that really struck me, your smile, your energy, you were just all in. You were all there. And I just felt like we'd really clicked. So I said, yeah, absolutely. I didn't even really know what I was joining. I at that point,
I
was
didn't
like,
know
"Do you
that at
what?
the time either.
She's so nice. Let's just do it." And then since then, it's been such a privilege, honestly. And I'm, even besides talking about it in front of an audience, it's been such an honor just getting to know you both kind of professionally and personally, because I love the way that you bring people together, the way that you can just unite everyone in a room, whether they've known each other or they haven't. You can just unite everyone and make them really excited about something that you're passionate about, that they may know nothing about. I just don't know how you do it. And I've watched you do it to other people. I've watched you do it to me. And I just think it's such a rare and precious skill. And you're just one of the warmest people, like from a personal perspective, now that we're friends. I just love spending time with you. And it's just lovely. So yeah, I'm delighted to have you.
And this gives us a good excuse to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay.
So now we get to hang out more.
Now we get to hang out more. Yeah, because... And I think that's it, right, where we thought our conversations are so fun. If we say so ourselves.
If we say so ourselves.
That I remember even in that very beginning, we were like, oh, I wish people could be fly on the walls. Like these, we're going on all directions, and I think we have pretty similar views on things, but coming at it from very different angles. And what we've said before, I think it's really about bringing together that. I feel sometimes when I talk about what period reality does and what we're trying to do. So as an organization, we advocate for cycle awareness. And what I find is in talking to people is that people are either heavily scientific, academic, evidence-based, or people just are looking for tools and ways to regulate their body, their nervous system. And that's often seen as like the woo-woo. And there's like, you've got one side and the other. And then I feel so passionate, I think, about like being in that middle space of like, how can we tell stories of lived experience? And this, like we've got thousands of those stories of people experiencing things that others might find woo-woo or whatever, but also bringing the scientific and the evidence-based information and bridge that gap for people, because I don't think people have to choose between one or the other.
No, they absolutely don't. Obviously, you'll know I feel really strongly about this, because actually it's not even that it's woo-woo, it's preventing illness and creating health. And it's bringing together two pieces that make a whole. And obviously that's the premise of why I founded the Delphi Clinic, is on the backing of the fact that we are used to stopping people or helping people who are already sick. How do you create wellness? And how do you create an environment for people to thrive? So if you've got all the right ingredients, if you like, you're staying well rather than picking up pieces from someone who's already sick. And so you're right. And so actually it's building evidence base for staying well to the already present evidence base and sort of clinical layer, which we've been doing for a lot longer, of reversing illness. And I think it's marrying those two up. So I completely agree.
And giving people options to make well-informed decisions, right? Like we talk about that a lot. In a lot of cases, there's not necessarily right or wrong way as well. But, when it's about your body and your trends and your rhythms, you want to know and understand those and know what your options are if things aren't going your way. So,
and you know what? It's also the concept. I mean, it's been poo-pooed over the years, but now I'm loving seeing the conversation.
Poo-poo.
You know
Okay,
what I
I'm
mean?
just gonna... Okay.
I'm now thinking of a professional word.
No, I think
Poo-poo
everyone
is
gets what
official.
poo-poo. Okay.
But, if you think about, I'm loving kind of seeing it move into the mainstream, that whole concept of N equals 1. And I don't know if you've come across it. And is all of our studies and evidence that we create is looking at large populations and saying this is 60 to 70% improvement when you apply this kind of intervention to, 60 to 70% of people got better. But actually, so many people now will tell you that, well, I tried this and I felt a lot better.
Yeah.
And actually, why should we say, well, no, that doesn't work?
Yeah.
Because actually, if you feel better and it works for you, that's fine. You do what works for you. And things that we eat are a really typical one. Some people say, there's like the diet wars, keto is the best thing to do and this is the best thing to do and dairy-free is the best thing to do. But actually, people that feel better eating a particular way, in a particular way, well, that's obviously the right way for their body. So I think listening to people and taking on board their experience is so important. And that's why it's like you say, this intersection is so important because it's the stories with the clinical expertise and marrying those up.
So that is a huge part of what we're going to be talking about on this podcast. What else can people expect?
Tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks
that have helped us, helped other people. Lots of stories, giggles.
Luckily, not all from us. We will bring in stories from other people.
Bring in stories from other people. Yeah, I think people might get fed up just listening to us after a while. What are your thoughts on what we'll bring to the table?
I think that's it. It's finding out what people are looking for as well. I think you and I are both quite open to just finding out what is it that people are struggling with, And I think one great example is that there's a lot of talk now around cycle tracking, right? Like you need the first place where to start is if you want to live a more cycle aware life, I guess, is by starting to track your cycle. And I remember that we'd been advocating for that for a couple of years, actually, of like just, in the morning, take a couple of minutes and ask yourself that question, how am I showing up today, right? To just do a quick body scan and start to appreciate how that changes throughout the month. And then I realized that question in itself, how am I showing up today, is such a difficult question.
It is, isn't it?
And we're so far removed from like so much is happening in our heads, and that relationship with our body is so distorted. And even finding 5 minutes is sometimes hard enough as it is when you've got a busy life and stuff. But how can we help people settle into that a little bit more, right? Like how can we actually figure out how we're feeling, how we're showing up, because we're not taught that, right? We haven't grown up with that. So
yeah, I completely agree. And I think actually it's so hard. I've tested a lot of cycle tracking apps. And it's interesting to see the language that is used, and you realize the complexity of creating a cycle tracking app that uses language that appeals to a majority. And actually, I think that's really, really difficult. And I suppose we should probably go back a step and talk about, well, what are we tracking?
Yeah.
So, when we think about, and I think you've sort of said this in the past, thinking about cycles, and it's the various phases of the cycle. So we talk about, I'll let you talk about, were you going to talk about the cycles?
You can wake me up in the middle of the night and have me talk about the cycles. But it's very true though, because I know, like, looking at my own experience, thinking about my cycle, I would always just think about my period. Once a month you'd have your period, and I hated my period. To be honest, I'm still not a huge fan of it. And I know that sounds super weird for someone who talks about periods and cycles all day, every day. But it's just because I've never come to learn the good parts of it. We always hear all the bad stories. And I'm definitely, these past couple of years, for me, has changed that narrative around what's going on in my body. And especially after having children, like obviously that gives you a whole nother appreciation for everything that's going on every single day to make that possible. But for me, that it was just about periods. So It was COVID time actually when I saw, I think it was a post on Instagram and someone talked about they're in a winter and the phases of the cycle. And I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was like, hold on, I've never heard that before. That's weird. So I went back, I looked it up. And I thought, surely that's not a thing because I'm from the Netherlands. We're quite an open-minded country. You know, we have good access to education. So if this was a thing, surely I would know about it. And then I realized it was a thing and that people were talking about it. It was just a handful of people. It was presented to me. The first book hit I got on Google, I don't even know if I want to say it because I don't want to promote it, but it was so heavily focused on fitting women in that capitalistic system. So it's like, how can we become more effective and productive and optimized and like all these things? And I'm like, where in this book are we talking about health?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, shouldn't we know all these things to live a healthier, happier life? So that was what sparked my interest, to just understand the cycle as a whole more. And if people go away today and they'll start researching, you'll see that some people talk about the 3 phases, some people talk about the 4. At Period Reality, we talk about the 4 different phases and how where in your cycle you are matters in terms of how you show up. And, you know, some examples that we often say is, you just referred to the winter before. We're always a little bit, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because it speaks to people's imagination so much, but then winter means something different for everyone.
People. Yeah, absolutely.
But the reason why today's episode, our first episode, is menstruation is because that's the first phase. Actually, the main physical evidence that it's day 1 of your cycle.
Yeah.
You started bleeding. That's where kind of your cycle kicks off. And that's for a lot of people, a very introverted, calming, resting phase. And then that's where it all kicks off.
Yeah, exactly. And all I was going to say is it's tricky because people sometimes, there's been a narrative shift as well in terms of the way that we talk about the 4 phases. And I'll just say what they are and then I'll come back to it in a sec, because you talked about menstrual phase and then follicular ovulation and luteal phase. Those are the sort of medical terms for them, aren't they? But then actually, when we've now, I think it's more accepted now to assign certain experiences to those phases. Yeah. But actually, it's also to say that that doesn't mean that applies to everybody.
No.
And that's the importance of tracking. Because I've had, you know, some women in clinic who've said to me, well, I've tracked and I don't actually feel like this in this phase. You know, and I've read that you're meant to feel calm and restful in the luteal phase, which is the phase just before your period starts. And I don't feel like that at all, you know, and actually I feel really energetic and really, I said, well, that's fine. The important thing is knowing when it is that shows up for you.
Yeah.
And knowing your own rhythm and your own pattern, because you'll know what to ask of your body in that time.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there's sort of global sort of suggestions about what's meant to happen in each phase, but more importantly, that sort of, you know, N=1, how it responds and relates to you is super important, because you can then advocate for yourself in that same way every time that time of the month comes.
Which is why we have that period reality rule, right? Like we always say, the only thing that's true is what is true for you.
Yeah.
And I think that is what you just said in a nutshell. Like it doesn't matter. And for me, because I knew that was like the case, when I first started tracking, I started to try and, you know, start tracking from a clean slate. And it was really, really difficult. So actually having a blueprint of what I may be experiencing or what I may be wanting to pay attention to was actually really helpful. Whereas to your point, like for others, it feels like, oh, if I'm different than what's on this piece of paper. So it's a very personal
it is
journey.
Really personal. You know, you're absolutely right. And I probably the opposite. Well, no, probably a little bit similar to you. I had horrendous periods when I was a teenager. Like absolutely horrendous. They were regular, but you know, I was literally bedbound for the first 2-3 days of my period. In fact, one of my bosses at work offered to operate on me whilst we were doing a ward round, because he sort of said,
are you
okay?
are
not in a good place. I can see what's going on there. So that rhythm, and like you say, in those days, I mean, I was new to gynecology, and the only thing that mattered was my period, because the entire month was the build-up of, my period is coming and I need to be thinking about that. So I wasn't actually thinking about the rest of the cycle. I was just literally bracing myself for those 3 days that I was going to have. that were not going to be pretty. And like you say, your cycle does change. I was really fortunate because after kids, it was, now I've got a beautiful cycle and it's just the dream. So now it has been, I say now, the last 10 years, from a personal perspective, I've had the experience of observing what happens in each phase and actually how I'm feeling and how I'm showing up. And it makes such a difference to me, and certainly to lots and lots of women that I speak to about it who come back and say, gosh, you're right. There are general rhythms that actually it seems to be the same time of the month. I don't really want to speak to people. I just want to sort of sit at home and just do quiet things, or I feel more confident.
I've got lots of ideas.
Exactly.
And I know there will be lots of people listening as well who have a way of a controlled cycle, right? Like they may have a coil, or maybe they're in the middle of perimenopause or have gone through menopause. And I know you and I have had lots of conversations around like, that doesn't mean that you're not part of the cycle anymore, right?
Absolutely.
And I know there'll be episodes where we dive into the cycle tracking a lot more and deeper, because this is still relevant for, you know, and to your point earlier, not just if you're the one experiencing it, but also if you live with someone who has a menstrual cycle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also it's remembering that actually sometimes giving yourself a rhythm. So there's a lot of women, say, who have gone through the menopause, but have quite a lot of symptoms. Sometimes tracking a rhythm has been shown to be quite helpful to them as well. So yeah, absolutely. It's not just about people who have a cycle, or even if you're on the pill. The coil is an interesting one, because with the coil, a lot of women are still ovulating, even with the hormone coil. And so actually, if you're still ovulating, which is the sort of middle of the cycle, you're still having that rhythm, which is easy to track. But even if you're on the pill, which technically, you won't be ovulating, that rhythm may still well show up for you. So yeah, I completely agree. Always worth tracking.
Always worth tracking. That would be like a tagline.
Yeah. And sorry, and the only thing I thought about there is...
Obviously, I didn't think you were done talking.
You were obviously,
tell us more.
That doesn't happen often. But when you think about tracking, it doesn't necessarily have to always be that every single day you sit down and write down things that you're feeling or how you're showing up today. It's a good idea to do if you're completely new to it. It's great, isn't it, when you do it right at the start for a few months until you kind of get to grips with it. But after a while, you'll probably know your own body. I don't know how it was for you, but after a while I knew, if I was waking up in a particular way or throughout the day, I was like, oh, I think I'm in this phase. Yeah, I know what's going on here. So then I knew, because actually I now knew, and you don't necessarily need to pinpoint it in the diary or in the calendar all the time, because you'll just know your body by then.
And I love that you're approaching that from such a positive way of like, after a few months you get there, because we're almost brushing over the fact that it will be a few months. And we have people approaching us and be like, it is a commitment. And I think especially nowadays with this instant gratification all around us, it's hopefully by having a regular podcast out and engaging with people on this topic in like a regular way, we get people to the point where they're ready to kind of commit and say, okay, I'm going to track my cycle. Because it is like, if you want to do it daily, we always say start with 3 cycles so that you get into the habit of actually, to your point, like noticing, pinpointing, making like however you want to track, but get into the habit of doing that daily. And there's not many things we do daily. There's a lot of conversation about like habits and how to create healthy habits and stuff, but it's going to take some commitment simply because we have to unlearn. And I would probably say the other option is just being fluid. If commitment and that idea of, life is filled with stuff to do, I just can't face yet another thing to do, is just saying, well, that's fine. I'm just going to just track your menstrual phase. So even if all you said was, I'm just going to keep an eye of exactly the day that my period arrives every month. Now, all that means is that it'll be a lot longer before you start to pick up patterns. But that means it might be easier for you to stay on top of it if all you're doing is checking one point. So when I started many years ago, all I did was literally put day 1 in the calendar, and that was it. I didn't look at it again.
And then I started realizing, oh, so day 1, 2, 3, this is how I'm feeling. But I mean, over we're now talking months and months, it was nearly a year. And I was like, oh, every time I'm coming up to day 1, which is the time that I do ping it into the diary, into my phone, I feel like this, a couple of days before. So then I started to notice that rhythm. And then I sort of started to think, oh, I wonder what ovulation's like. And then I started picking up a little bit more on ovulation. This was over probably about 2-3 years. So it just felt a little bit more gradual. But I did start to pick up patterns. And if you're thinking of, we're giving, a habit that is going to be a lifetime, if you like, or certainly at least till your 50s, then it doesn't matter if it takes you 3 months or 5 years to get to it.
And underlying is that it's not about tracking our cycles.
Yes, exactly.
Right? It's about getting to know and understand our own bodies.
Yeah. And eventually
that goes way beyond cycles.
Exactly. And that was the thing that actually I was thinking about before when we brought it up in terms of tracking, is that hopefully eventually you won't need to track your cycle at all. Because I almost feel like that whole idea of tracking continuously forever creates some anxiety, creates a degree of anxiety in itself. And I think eventually you just...
Well, eventually we're raising generations that are doing this from the get-go.
Exactly. Or that aren't even going to do it because they're going to be in tune with their body when their cycle starts. And
well, more on that in a later episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just said something about like slowing down, maybe when you're in your menstrual phase. I know we said we like to end every episode with like a little tip of the day.
Tip of the day.
What would be your
I reckon for the menstrual phase, the most important one would be eating iron-rich foods. So you do lose quite a bit of blood, and some women more than others, particularly if you've got heavy periods. So I would say eating iron-rich foods and staying really well hydrated. So lots of water, avoiding fizzy drinks that can make your symptoms worse. That would be my tip.
My tip would be maybe cancel one non-essential appointment that you have this week.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And not feel guilty about it.
And I think that's guilty, not feel FOMO.
Not feel FOMO. And don't feel like rest is weak. Yeah, we're owning that stuff.
Rest is not weak.
Rest is not weak.
Rest is some powerful stuff.
On that note, shall we wrap up?
Yes, let's do it.
You're going to grab your notes? This is the time. At one day, we won't need our notes. That day is not today.
It's not today. So what were our notes? There you are.
Have you got it?
I have.
Look at you.
See?
Well, thank you for tuning in to Not Designed for the Grind by Period Reality. We loved sharing this space with you.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, hit subscribe and share it with a friend who needs a little cycle wisdom. Do you know what? I'm sorry. That just made me laugh because my kids and my husband have a hit subscribe YouTubes.
I know. Click here below, leave a little like, do all those things. You'll find show notes, resources, and more on periodreality.org.
And don't forget, your cycle is powerful. Keep listening to it.
Until next time! If you would like to reach out to the Not Designed for the Grind team or want to tell us your story, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@periodreality.org or follow us on Instagram at periodrealityofficial. You can also connect with us directly on Instagram at the.delphi.clinic and at Marlou Cornelissen, or find us on LinkedIn under Dr. Katerina Bambang and Marlou Cornelissen. If you'd like more resources, show notes and updates, visit periodreality.org/podcast. If someone came to mind while you were listening, send them this episode. And if you believe in what we're building, the simplest way to support us is to follow the show on Spotify or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Ratings and reviews really do help more people find us, and 5-star reviews go a long way. A big thank you to all of you listeners, and please remember, the only thing that is true is what is true for you. Not Designed for the Grind is a podcast by Period Reality. The show is produced by Isabella Lindahl, created and hosted by Dr. Katerina Bambang and myself, Marlou Cornelissen. Audio editing and mixing by Delilah Odima, and our visual branding is developed by Millie Mensa. A special thank you to Favor Asueleman and the incredible team at Period Reality. We'll see you next time.